has been a very heartening event. So many Mahants from so many prominent temples of Vrindavan have sent the garland prasadam to honor Srila Prabhupada, who was the greatest ambassador of Vrindavan, who took the glories of Vrindavan all over the world, and he brought devotees from all over the world to come and see and appreciate Vrindavan, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, especially as taught by Gauranga Mahaprabhu, which is the pinnacle of spiritual philosophy of Bhagavatam as propounded in our Vedic literatures. This is considered the most confidential part of the Vedic literature, not always disclosed, and requires very extraordinary qualifications to understand, to appreciate, to realize. And that extraordinary level of spiritual philosophy, which is hidden and kept confidential in the works of the Vedic literatures, which only a few acharyas know about, that confidential message Srila Prabhupada took all over the world, and he wanted to distribute this knowledge. A very special acharya, an extraordinary teacher, a spiritual teacher among all the devotees of the Lord, who manifested his leelas some years ago, and we are all very fortunate to be under his shelter. And today we are observing his disappearance ceremony. We have a few excerpts from some of the last days of Srila Prabhupada on this planet. I will read a few of those important occurrences in the year 1977. And in between, I will also invite other devotees. Maharaj, who is here with us, also to say a few words. To extend a hearty welcome to His Holiness Kirtanananda Ban Maharaj, who has come from Calcutta. I request him to accept a garland, prasadam garland. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. As part of his instruction and example, Srila Prabhupada knew he would have to show people just how to die. He had escaped death a number of times by Krishna's grace, by the prayers of his disciples, and by his own pure and powerful will to propagate his movement. But from the signs given by him by Lord Krishna in 1977, Srila Prabhupada began decisively and conclusively ending his mission in the material world. And among his final duties was his giving complete guidelines on how to die. He was perfectly showing how to do that, which everyone has to do, but which is most difficult to do successfully, to die. Tracing some of the events that happened in the early part of 1977, from February 7th to March 4th, 1977, Srila Prabhupada was in Mayapur. One of the devotees recalls, when we got to Mayapur in 1977, just before Prabhupada got that really bad sickness that eventually led to his disappearance. A pujari from Mahesh Pandit Sunadi came to meet Srila Prabhupada. He wanted Srila Prabhupada to do a program in his small temple in his village. We knew it was going to be a small, rinky-dinky affair, but Prabhupada immediately agreed. I was unhappy because I knew how weak Srila Prabhupada was by that time. In fact, when we first arrived in Mayapur, one morning on the balcony after breakfast, Prabhupada was looking out over the fields and then turned to me and said, "Never in my life have I felt as weak as I do now. But still, I would like to finish this Bhagavatam." I had seen evidences of Prabhupada's decrease in general health and fitness. Several times I had to literally pick him up when he had collapsed on staircases. So anyway, I was very concerned and I really didn't want Prabhupada to go to this program. I complained, "Srila Prabhupada, why do you have to go?" Prabhupada said, No, he has asked, I must go. It is preaching." I said, "But Prabhupada, there are so many sannyasis here, they can do the program." He said, "No, he wants me to go. I must go." Since I was upset, Prabhupada said, just like that story in the Krishna book about Pradyumna, he was injured on the battlefield and taken away, but then he immediately went back to fight, even though he was injured. That was his duty. I said, "But Srila Prabhupada, it was his charioteer's duty to take him off the battlefield when he was sick." Prabhupada said, "Yes, and it was his duty to immediately return and fight." So he defeated me. It was his determination, and we did that program. Prabhupada wanted to encourage that pujari. It was a pandal program with 4 or 5 rickety steps leading up to the stage. Prabhupada immediately started stepping up one by one. By that time I was aware of how weak he was. So I stood on the step below him. As he went one step up, I went up one step. And I had my hands just in case anything happened. I had my hands out just in case anything happened. Prabhupada was pushing himself up the steps with his cane. He had little strength in his legs. So he put one foot up, and then to get the other one up, he would actually push himself up with his cane. When he got to the last step, he was straining. And then his strength went out and he collapsed. I caught him immediately and literally carried him up and put him on the stage. Prabhupada walked over to his seat and sat down like nothing had happened. Prabhupada literally sacrificed his life for us. I saw it. He wore his body out. The non-devotees are fond of identifying the cause of death. You could say that Prabhupada wore out his body in the service of mankind. That was the cause of his disappearance. From May 17th to August 27th, 1977, Srila Prabhupada came here to Vrindavan. His servant, Bhakti Charu Swami, at that time recalls, when Prabhupada arrived in Vrindavan, the devotees were so happy. And when Prabhupada went to his room, all the devotees came in, and there Prabhupada broke the news why he came to Vrindavan. And I remember in a flash of a moment, their ecstasy was transformed into agony. They all started to cry. And understanding their feelings, Srila Prabhupada then started to console the devotees by explaining about the futility of our material existence. He quoted the verse, Dehinosmin yata dehe, that it is just a matter of transmigrating from one body to another. Prabhupada called me when all the devotees left, and he told me, from now on, don't cook for me. Don't force me to eat anything. He said, what's the use of eating when there is no appetite? And I felt that Prabhupada is actually stopping to eat and drink, just like Parikshit Maharaj preparing to leave his body. Another devotee, Mataji Moksha Lakshmi Dasi, recalls, the most dramatic thing I remember of that period is when Srila Prabhupada left for London in August 1977. We can see how Srila Prabhupada had come here preparing to leave his body, but then when he got news that there were devotees around the world waiting for his coming, looking forward to see him, have his association, he decided to travel once again in that condition. In fact, when devotees were told Prabhupada that if he makes one more trip, and if devotees get to see Srila Prabhupada once more, their whole life they will be determined to remain Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada was very encouraged to make this journey when he heard that. He left at midnight. So all the devotees stayed up to say goodbye to Prabhupada because he was going off to the west to preach. It was going to be a 5 to 6 hours journey those days from Vrindavan to Delhi because the road was in such a bad condition. As the car pulled off, it suddenly stopped. And it stopped in such a position in front of the temple that I was looking down at Srila Prabhupada and Prabhupada was looking up at me. He was, at least one guest house mattress had been placed in the back of the ambassador car and he was lying on it. And I'll never forget looking down at Prabhupada and Prabhupada looking at me because obviously his body was flesh and bones. But there he was going off to London to preach. And I was so shocked because he didn't look like he should be going anywhere. But still his determination to preach and to please his devotees was far bigger than his desire to look after his own body. And that picture of Srila Prabhupada has stayed in my mind all these years. Prabhupada's determination to preach. 28th to September 13th, 1977, Srila Prabhupada was in London. Actually, his plan was to go from London to the United States. He was heading to the Gita Nagari farm. Prabhupada said that he has finished only half of his work and he wanted to establish the Gita Nagari farm and establish a Varnashrama community. And he wanted to give further directions. So he was heading towards Gita Nagari farm. But Srila Prabhupada's condition deteriorated when he was in London, just after about 15 days, and he returned to Bombay. Dhanavir Goswami recalls Prabhupada's condition when he was in London. In 1977, when Srila Prabhupada last visited Bhaktivedanta Manor, we were very disturbed to see him so thin and weak, wearing sunglasses, being carried on a palanquin. Prabhupada had some kind of a discomfort that any light was very painful for him. So he was wearing dark glasses to prevent even normal daylight. And he was being carried on a palanquin as he could not walk. But we were thrilled to have his association. He only came into the temple room. Of devotees from Germany and France and all the Sankirtan devotees had come. So the temple was packed. The kirtans were enthusiastic and strong. Prabhupada sat with his hands folded and didn't move. But at some point during the kirtan, he would move a finger. When we saw him move that finger, we would all begin jumping and dancing in ecstasy. Before, when Prabhupada danced, everyone was forced to get up and dance. But at this time, that same potency was there when Prabhupada just moved his finger. My service was to put 3 tiny drops of Charanamrit in his hand. Balloons. There was no way he could get his ring off. He would take those 3 drops and then we would wash his hand. It so happened that during this time, he was rushed to the hospital for some minor emergency operation. When Srila Prabhupada was at the manor, we observed Vyasa Puja. Prabhupada came to the temple room and Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave a long, detailed explanation of how Srila Prabhupada started the movement and how he preached in the early days. It was wonderful. Prabhupada was very pleased by that. He was reliving how he started his whole preaching movement, and once in a while he would interject something. When Tamal spoke about Prabhupada's early preaching in Los Angeles and how Prabhupada was going to different houses, Prabhupada said, I was even going to a garage to speak. Prabhupada had programs in a garage in Los Angeles. Time in London temple, Punyathama Das recalls. Prabhupada's pastime in London during those days was the ultimate gift that Srila Prabhupada blessed me with. I was living in Bury Place, distributing books. Srila Prabhupada was at the manor for a week, and we would go and see him each day. One day he said he wanted to see Radha Londonishwara, and that next morning he arrived at Bury Place. That was going to be his last darshan of Sri Radha Londonishwara. I was waiting and got the palanquin out of the van and held it until Srila Prabhupada was seated. We 4 brahmacharis carried him into the temple. I was in front, right 12 inches from Prabhupada's face. The curtains opened. The voice of Yamuna Devi singing the Govindam prayers filled the temple hall. And I looked at Prabhupada's emotional response. He was gushing tears. His silk kurta was soaked. He waved his hand to play Govindam prayers again and continued to gush tears. Later, Srila Prabhupada said softly, I just want you all to love Krishna. I got to witness the relationship of Krishna's pure devotee associating with Radha and Krishna, the ultimate consciousness achievable. And Srila Prabhupada was with Radha and Krishna at that moment. And that moment was the most blessed gift anyone could receive. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. From London, Srila Prabhupada returned to Bombay. And he stayed in Bombay from September 14th to September 28th. Just about 2 weeks in 1977. Another devotee in Bombay, a businessman at that time, recalls. Srinathji Das, as a young man in Bombay, first met Srila Prabhupada in 1971. Every time Srila Prabhupada would come by to Bombay, he got an opportunity to meet him and kept arguing with him about his Mayavada ideas. He was influenced by a Mayavadi guru and would refuse to surrender to Krishna or his representative. Although he kept in close touch with the devotees of the ISKCON temple, he was not certain about Krishna consciousness or accepting Srila Prabhupada as his spiritual master. Srinathji Das recalls. The 28th of September 1977 was a very sad day. At about 4:30 in the morning, I got a phone call from Giriraj Swami. Crying, he said, "I want you to bring your big Dodge car." I had a huge American car with a back seat long enough to lie down in. Giriraj Swami said, "Prabhupada wants to leave his body." I said, "What?" I had never heard anybody say that someone wanted to leave his body. It sounded as if he wanted to commit suicide. I said, "What do you mean?" "Prabhupada wants to leave his body." "Where does he want to leave his body?" He said, "He wants to go to Vrindavan and he is leaving his body. He's going away and we have to take him to the train station." By that time, Prabhupada hadn't eaten for nearly 6 months. He was living only on juice and charanamrit, and his body was depleted. He had hardly any muscles, and his veins were pressing on his bones. It was very painful to see him. Here was the person with whom I had fought and argued. Here was the person who was such a fine debater that he was like a lion. He could defeat anyone philosophically. But that morning, when I saw how very thin Prabhupada was, it reminded me of Krishna's description in the Bhagavad Gita of a person withdrawing himself like a tortoise withdraws himself within his shell. So in Bombay on the 28th of September 1977, Srila Prabhupada decided to leave to go to Vrindavan. And for the first time, I cleaned my car. I didn't want Prabhupada to sleep in an unclean car. My wife arranged nice silk bedding, flowers and incense in it, and I drove to the temple. There Prabhupada was brought down from his quarters in a big basket. It reminded me of stories of Moses and Karna, who were both put in baskets. Devotees were crying. They were devastated. They were intensely feeling imminent separation from Prabhupada. I was supposed to drive, and I felt like Akrura, the cruel person who took Krishna from the gopis. I was taking Prabhupada away from the devotees, but that was my duty. I had to do that. I drove, and next to me was big Brahmananda Swami, and next to him was Tamal Krishna Goswami, who was Prabhupada's last secretary. And finally there was Giriraj Maharaj. It was such a huge car that 4 people could sit in the front. Prabhupada was lying on the back seat, and Upendra, his servant, was sitting on the floor of the car next to Prabhupada. Prabhupada's luggage was behind. Like a school teacher, Tamal Krishna Maharaj told me, "Don't drive fast, drive very slowly. The Bombay roads have potholes, and Prabhupada would be uncomfortable if I drove fast." I said, "Fine." We were going to Bombay Central Station. And I asked, which train are we going to catch? Someone said, Prabhupada's taking the Mathura Express to Vrindavan. It leaves at 11 a.m. I started to drive very slowly. From the back, Upendra told me, Prabhupada wants you to drive faster. So I said, okay, if Prabhupada wants me to drive faster, I will drive faster. And I picked up speed. My huge car could really move. But the moment I pressed the accelerator, Tamal Krishna Maharaj got very upset. He said, I told you to go slowly. What are you doing? I said, Upendra just told me that Prabhupada wants me to drive fast. Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, no, go slowly. I slowed down. Within a minute, Upendra again said, Prabhupada says, go faster. Why aren't you going faster? I thought, that person I have to serve is Prabhupada. So I'll drive faster. I said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you sort this out with Upendra and allow me to drive. We thought we had reached the Bombay Central Station too early. Rama Tulasi, another devotee there, and I went to the station master to get a wheelchair for Prabhupada to transport him from my car to his special cabin on the train. In my usual style, I asked the station master, is the Mathura Express going at 11 a.m.? He said, didn't you read today's newspaper? It leaves at 10:30 a.m. The timing had changed that very day. I looked at my watch and said, there are 5 minutes left. The train is leaving in 5 minutes. Rama Tulasi and I ran with the wheelchair. I told that station master, I'll pay you anything, but stop the train. Don't start it until I tell you. He said, what? I've never heard such a request. I said, there is a big team coming. A very holy person is going to leave his body in Vrindavan and he has to be on the train. The station master said, leave his body? What do you mean? I said, just run with me. So we ran. This happened 25 years ago when I was 37. I told Giriraj Maharaj, the train is going a half hour early today. He said, no, according to the timetable, it leaves at 11 a.m. I said, whatever it says, that doesn't matter. The station master is going to blow his whistle and the train is going to go. We ran. Some of the devotees got Prabhupada's special cabin ready. It should have been an air-conditioned one, but for some reason, the devotees had booked a non-air-conditioned cabin. We took Prabhupada into his compartment just a few minutes before the train was about to leave. From 4:30 until 10:30 that morning, I had not had any water or food and I was very thirsty. I bought a soda from a stand at the station. When Upendra came and said, Prabhupada wants to see you. I left the soda and went in the cabin, wondering, why is Prabhupada calling me? Prabhupada said, come closer. I went very close to him and he said, thank you for driving me. I was very touched. Prabhupada was just about to give up his body, and except for this small service, I had done nothing much. So in the train, in front of everyone, I offered my obeisance and caught Prabhupada's lotus feet. Tamal Krishna Maharaj and others said to me, don't touch his feet. I said, no, that is it. This is the last moment I will ever get. I said, Prabhupada, I surrender to you. You are my spiritual master. He put pressure on his elbow and got up a little. He was smiling sweetly. The train started. And some of the devotees said, look, the train started and you better jump off. Otherwise the next station is quite far away. Reluctantly, I jumped off the moving train and I watched it to go until the last car had left. I wasn't thirsty anymore. I didn't care for the soda. With tears in my eyes, I got into my car and lo and behold, there was Prabhupada's garland on the steering wheel. He had not forgotten me. Prabhupada had told his servant to leave his personal garland prasadam in the car for me. That was the last time I saw Prabhupada. From 1971 through 1977, my memories are of arguing with Srila Prabhupada about Mayavada philosophy, Mayavada gurus, debating with him, arguing with him against surrendering to Krishna or his representative. Finally, at the end, I surrendered to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Vrindavan, from October 2nd to November 14th, Srila Prabhupada was here in Vrindavan. One of the devotees who was looking after him recalls, Abhiram Das. There were a lot of events taking place that for us were very emotionally churning and disturbing. There were moments when we would feel that Prabhupada was going to recover, when he would start to take something and indicate that he would stay with us, and we'd feel the greatest elation and the greatest joy. We felt like we had been dunked underwater in a dunking chair, and suddenly we were being brought up for a breath of air. And then just as extreme and suddenly, we would see a symptom that he was not perhaps recovering his health, and it was continuing to deteriorate. And then we would be plunged into the greatest abyss of lamentation and great fear and anxiety that he might leave us. So I was present at the time when Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj came to visit Srila Prabhupada and sat on his bed at his feet and massaged Srila Prabhupada's feet and held his hand. And Srila Prabhupada asked him for forgiveness, saying, "Please forgive me for offenses that I committed to my god brothers, the Vaishnavas." He said, "What could I do? I had to preach strongly." And Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, of course, rubbed his hand, rubbed his arm and said, "There is no offense, Maharaj. There is no offense from you." I think, he said, "Please be at peace." Prabhupada actually cried for that forgiveness. 7:30 p.m. in his room at the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada gave his final instruction by leaving this mortal world and going back to Godhead. His departure was exemplary because his whole life was exemplary. His departure marked the completion of a lifetime of pure devotional service to Krishna. A few days before the end, Srila Prabhupada had said he was instructing as far as he could, and his secretary had added, "You are the inspiration." "Yes," Srila Prabhupada had replied, "that I shall do until the last breathing." Prabhupada's last breathing was glorious, not because of any last-minute mystical demonstration, but because Srila Prabhupada remained in perfect Krishna consciousness. Like grandfather Bhishma Deva, he remained completely collected and noble and grave, teaching until the end. He was preaching that life comes from life, not from matter, and he was showing that one should preach with every breath he has. The many devotees who crowded the large room bore witness that up to the very end, Prabhupada remained exactly the same. There was nothing suddenly incongruous with what he had previously shown and taught them. At the time of his departure, therefore, he was teaching how to die by always depending on Krishna. Prabhupada's passing away was peaceful. During the evening of November 14, the Kaviraj asked him, "Is there anything you want?" And Prabhupada replied faintly, "Kuch ichha nahi, I have no desire." Of the final moments, His Holiness Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj recalls, "It's not that you could hear anything, but I was really close to Prabhupada's face. I was looking at him, and I just noticed that his lips moved. And when his lips moved, it appeared as though Prabhupada was pronouncing Hare Krishna. And at that moment, his jaw dropped. And at that very second, when he said Hare Krishna and his lips opened, I saw the color of Prabhupada's body change. When I saw that happen, I thought, now my spiritual master has left his body." And everyone else in the room, they knew that that was the moment also.
they started weeping like they had lost their life because Prabhupada was our life. I was watching Pisima and she was weeping. She just bowed down to Prabhupada's feet and she started taking the dust from Prabhupada's feet and she started smearing the dust on her head and smearing the dust on her eyes. Then I decided that I should do as Pishima had done. So then I went and took the dust from Prabhupada's feet and I rubbed it on my head and my eyes. And the majority of the devotees left. I stayed behind and Upendra, very masterfully, he took control of the situation and he brought fresh clothes and he very, very quickly dressed Prabhupada. I remember he took a cloth and he tied it around Prabhupada's head so that Prabhupada's mouth would remain closed. And they put the palanquin, they put Prabhupada on his palanquin to Prabhupada. Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bhavananda Maharaj, they consulted with the Gaudiya Math devotees and then it was decided to take Prabhupada for a last darshan of the deities and then make parikrama of the temple and then place Prabhupada on his Vyasasan for the Guru Puja. So I remember when they carried Prabhupada into the temple room, one of our god brothers, his name is Puri Das, he was the pujari for Gornitai. And either it was at the beginning of the Arati or at the end of the Arati, I'm not really sure, the last Arati, it was he turned and he saw Prabhupada on the palanquin and Puri fainted right on the spot in front of Gornitai. They put the palanquin right up on Prabhupada's Vyasasan. The palanquin just fitted up there quite perfectly. Bhavananda, who had been caring for Prabhupada throughout Prabhupada's final pastimes and had been with him, had been giving such a strong face and such a strong appearance. I remember when they put Prabhupada on the Vyasasan, Bhavananda went behind the Vyasasan and he just collapsed and he started sobbing like a child. And the Gaudiya Math devotees, they were leading Kirtan. And when they sang Jai Anilo Premadhana, I remember I personally collapsed. And the devotees practically, they couldn't sing because everyone was crying so much. There was a succession of bhajans and kirtans and everyone offered garlands and flower petals to Prabhupada.